Well, joining me now from New York is Hamdan Azhar. He's a former data scientist at Facebook and the founder of the data journalism company Prismoji. And from Vilnius in Lithuania is Ian Mitchell, QC. He is the chairman of the Working Party on Surveillance for the European Federation of Bars, and he also sits on the Data Protection Working Party of the Bar of England and Wales. Thanks both so much for joining us. Hamdan, let me start with you. I would really appreciate if you could give me an example of how this actually works. It's, in the end, about this psychological manipulation, they're saying. A campaign that Cambridge Analytica is advising has your data on Facebook. What ads, tell us, does it actually put on the page, or what messages is it really sending you to so-called manipulate you or to perpetrate this mind hacking that we should all be so disturbed by?
Well, thank you, Andrea. It's great to be here. I think we have to understand the incentives that Cambridge Analytica has to exaggerate, honestly, their abilities to influence people's behavior using psychographic targeting. They are, at the end of the day, trying to say that they have all these incredible abilities so that they can get more clients and they can get more press, they can get free media coverage. Frankly, I think it's a bit exaggerated because the mechanics of how it works are pretty complicated. So they had this quiz on Facebook, this personality quiz developed by this researcher. So they have people responding to these personality questions, and they're trying to estimate their attributes on extroversion and neuroticism and agreeableness. And using these big 5 attributes, then they're trying to predict their political beliefs. So that's the first prediction. That's pretty hard. The accuracy of that model it hasn't been explained. It hasn't been described in the literature. In my experience, I think that's a pretty hard leap to do. And once they've modeled people's political behavior using these psychological attributes, then they have to target these people on Facebook. Now, targeting on Facebook is predominantly using likes, using the pages you've liked. So now that they know some people are neurotic and maybe they support Donald Trump, they have to find what are the pages people who support Donald Trump like on Facebook. You know, is it Alex Jones? Is it Fox News? And they have to target them on Facebook. So it all sounds pretty crude to me. I think, honestly, it's a bit far-fetched to to imagine that they've successfully manipulated all these elections around the world. And I think we need to be quite skeptical of their claims and also recognize that we live in a world in which surveillance capitalism... Yes, go ahead.
Sure, then, I mean, what really is all the fuss all about?
Well, I think the fuss is about our data, is about who controls our data in the world, in a world in which we live in a world of surveillance capitalism, where the model that funds the internet is a model in which all of our behaviors and our activities on our computers and on our smartphones are monitored and logged to, minute detail so that advertisers can show us ads.
Okay.
That's the world in which we live, and it's a world in which big companies such as Facebook and Google and Apple control tremendous amounts of data about us. And people are concerned because we're just leaking all of this data out there, and big companies have this data, and what are they doing with it? I think that's the deep-seated concern that people have.
Okay.
And Facebook, prior to 2014, had a pretty liberal policy where they had this graph API, and developers could build apps on top of this API, and by building these apps, they could get data on people not only who are using these apps, but the friends of people who are using these apps. And that's a lot of data that's out there. Now, frankly, it is concerning. I just don't think the concerns that this was used to manipulate elections at a large scale are frankly justified, given the evidence we've seen so far.
It may be concerning, but Ian Mitchell, let me ask you, I mean, aren't marketers and advertisers simply adapting now to social media? I mean, before it was banks and credit card companies selling our data on to third companies that used to bombard us with telemarketing. Remember, we used to get phone calls at home. They used to stack our mailboxes with junk mail. They had our addresses because banks and credit card companies were selling on their data lists for profit. What's the difference?
Well, I think, as they say in France, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same. What's changing is, of course, the technology and the abilities. And I'm quite amused at the proposition, which is probably true, that it's extremely difficult to data mine and focus and a manipulate opinion, but that isn't a good reason for why you should get away with trying to do it. I think the problem is that people feel that data mining is getting very intrusive. There is a sense in which we are our data. We leave digital footprints on the internet, and the digital footprint is almost a simulacrum of ourselves. So people feel very possessive about their data.
Okay, but they can't get everything for free. They want these social media sites for free. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yes, absolutely there's no such thing as a free lunch. And let me fess up, I have got a card that's issued by my local supermarket in the UK, and it's scanned every time I do my shopping. Now, I'm quite comfortable about the supermarket knowing what I buy and sending me tailored offers. I know that what I'm doing is helping them with their business model. It helps them refine and focus the sorts of goods they sell. It enables them to shift stuff to me. Because I know about it, I'm perfectly content for them to do it. But the issue is that people are going in to things like harmless little quizzes, as they think, on the internet. It is a social medium. They think that they're having a bit of harmless fun, and then they're taken aback when the news comes out, be it true or be it exaggerated, that in fact this material is being used for purposes that they had no idea it was being used for.
Okay. Ian, before I go back to Hamdan, then tell me, when does it actually cross the line from being good, creative campaigning to actually cheating and deception?
When people start telling lies, frankly.
But campaigning always does that.
Manipulating. No, I mean, for years before I got involved in seriously focusing on what I do now, I was quite heavily involved in politics in the UK. I ran for Parliament umpteen times, even ran for the European Parliament. And one thing that you can slant the news, you can give emphasis, but one thing I can say is that neither I nor any of my opponents told a mistruth, told an untruth. And of course, the whole point about, you think of the fake news, the Pope supports Donald Trump news that was one of the facetious examples. That's about telling people lies. And of course, you create a mechanism in which that propaganda can be focused and can feed in, operating with what psychologists call confirmation bias.
Okay, Hamdan, let me ask you, I mean, in all of this, does Facebook now have to take some responsibility for helping spread lies and fake news?
I think not only is the problem that mistruths are being spread on social networks, I think the problem, we have to call it by its name, is centralization. It's that, why do we live in a world where a handful of big companies have all this power? That's why I think decentralization is a path forward. It's not just delete Facebook or Facebook has all this data. Why don't we have decentralized applications where people can control their own data, where there can be transparency around how that data is used and who has access to that data? And I think that's why I'm so excited about blockchain and decentralization. And that's what we're building at Zap.org, where people can control their data. We don't need a world where there's one giant company that runs the world's greatest social network and everyone is forced to use it because of network effects. I think we can envision a more open and transparent world where people have the power, not big corporations.
But that's great. But until that's done, is someone responsible for illegally giving access to data that users did not want given? Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. In Europe, we've got the General Data Protection Regulation coming into effect in about 6 or 8 weeks' time, and we've already got pretty rigorous data protection laws. The whole idea being that people should have some sort of sense of autonomy over their data. Data shouldn't be misused under the existing law and under the new law as well. The key element is consent. What the GDPR is particularly strong on is the whole notion of informed consent. You should actually know specifically what your data is going to be used for and be given the opportunity to agree or not agree that it be used for those purposes. That's why I gave you my example of the supermarket. I'm very happy that they use my data because I know that they're only going to use it to flog me groceries, but I'm not at all happy that somebody is mining my data and going to start using me as a kind of a laboratory rat and manipulate the way my brain works.
Okay.
Very different thing altogether.
We'll have to see.
That's why we have data protection laws.
We'll have to see if legislation can keep up with this constantly changing technology. Ian Mitchell, I'll have to give you the last word. Thank you so much for joining us. Hamdan Azhar as well. Thank you both for being on the Newsmakers.